Hello, my dear friends. This is Maggie from Grandma Old Stories, and today I'm sharing something that happened to me about 10 years ago, when I was 63 years old. It's a story I've never told publicly before, but I think it needs to be heard. Where are you watching from tonight? Drop your city or country in the comments because this story, well, it's about family betrayal and the hardest decision I ever made. So grab your tea or coffee, settle in, and let me take you back to Christmas Eve 2014, the night everything changed. Now, I was a police sergeant back then, badge number 2847, working the streets of Riverside. Not the fancy California one, but our little Riverside in Ohio. And the man at the center of this story? My grandpa Walter, the kindest soul you'd ever meet, 82 years young. With hands that once built furniture and a smile that could melt the coldest heart. I kicked the front door open with my shoulder, the wood splintering under the force. Grandpa Walter's frail body cradled against my chest, his weight barely more than my patrol vest. Crystal wine glasses froze midair, laughter dying like candles snuffed out. The fireplace crackled, flames casting shadows across stunned faces. My father's, my mother's, my siblings. My badge caught the firelight, glinting cold and official. I met every pair of shocked eyes in that overheated living room and let my voice drop to ice. He's safe, elder abuse report filed. Just 6 words, measured and metallic, that split the holiday air like a knife through butter. 2 hours earlier, my patrol cruiser had been idling at the curb on Birchwood Avenue, engine ticking as it cooled down from the shift. Christmas lights stitched themselves from porch to porch, red and green and gold, twinkling like false promises in the December darkness. Dispatch had gone quiet, too quiet for a holiday eve, so my partner Rodriguez had tossed me that familiar line. "Go home, Sarge, it's Christmas Eve, for crying out loud." I told him the truth, plain and simple. I didn't really have a home to go to anymore. Not since my divorce 3 years back. But Grandpa Walter did. And I wanted to see his weathered face light up when I surprised him with my presence. I parked half a block away. Didn't want the marked Ford to announce my arrival and spoil the surprise. You know? The breath left my lungs in pale ribbons, visible in the bitter cold. 28 degrees, the kind of cold that's honest, that cuts right through your nose and makes your hands feel like they belong to someone else entirely. Snow squeaked under my duty boots as I crossed the yard I'd grown up playing in. The same yard where Grandpa taught me to throw a baseball when I was 7. Through the wide bay window, the living room blazed with warmth, the kind of cozy comfort that money buys without apology. I saw them clearly, silhouettes that used to mean safety and love. Dad Marcus, white as a linebacker gone soft. Mom Patricia with her holiday hairdo stiff with spray. My brother Derek mid-story gesturing wildly. My sister Cara laughing right on cue like she always did. Then I saw him and my heart it stopped. There on the covered porch, where the December wind slipped its icy fingers under the eaves, sat Grandpa Walter. Thin flannel shirt, not even a proper sweater. House slippers with holes in the toes, no blanket, no coat, nothing. His gnarled hands trembled in his lap, shaking like leaves in a November storm. The sight punched every bit of breath from my lungs, left me gasping. "Grandpa!" I whispered urgently, my voice cracking despite my training. His head turned slowly, so carefully, like a man who'd learned his bones could betray him at any moment. Then that smile, oh Lord, that smile that could fold time itself backward, found me through the darkness. "Maggie girl." he said, using my childhood name, his voice threadbare and weak. You came to see your old grandpa? I damn well came. I shrugged out of my duty jacket faster than I'd ever moved, wrapping it around his bony shoulders. My body heat bled from the fabric into him, and I felt him lean into that warmth like a man dying of thirst leans into water. The cop in me started doing inventory automatically. Skin pale as paper, lips tinged with blue at the edges, persistent shivering that wouldn't stop, but alert and oriented, too polite to complain even as his body shut down. The granddaughter in me, though? She wanted to tear that door clean off its expensive hinges and shake some sense into every person inside. Why are you out here, Grandpa? I asked, my jaw clenched so tight it ached. He fluttered one hand dismissively, like he was shooing away a fly. Fresh air, Maggie girl. Just getting some fresh air is all. Inside, Derek's punchline landed with perfect timing, and laughter rolled through the glass like a wave. How long have you been out here? I demanded, keeping my voice gentle for him but feeling rage build in my chest like a storm. Oh, now don't fuss, sweetheart, he said softly. They're busy in there, it's a party, lots of guests. They're busy, it's a party, like that made it okay? 3 years of wire transfers flashed behind my eyes like receipts I'd been too stupid to question. Every month, for $100 for Grandpa's care. Meals, medications, heating bills, whatever he needed. Those dollars had tasted like peace when I'd sent them from my checking account, sacrificing dinners out and vacations so he'd be comfortable. Now they tasted like ash and lies in my mouth. My department-issued phone buzzed in my pocket, vibrating against my hip. Sergeant Chan checking in. You good, Max? Need backup or you calling it a night? I typed back quickly, thumbs stiff from cold. All good, partner, Merry Christmas. Then I slid my arms carefully under Grandpa Walter's thin frame. He weighed less than my tactical vest and equipment belt combined. Couldn't have been more than 120 soaking wet. When I lifted him, a small sound escaped his throat. Not quite pain but definitely relief, like he'd been waiting for someone to notice, to care, to see him. Maggie, dear girl. He breathed against my shoulder. Your mother's gonna be cross with you for making a scene. She'll live through it, I said grimly, my voice harder than I'd intended. The front door handle gave me nothing when I tried it. Locked tight. Of course it was locked, right? The house that kept the expensive heat and also kept us out in the cold. I positioned Grandpa against my chest, supporting his weight with one arm, and knocked 3 times, measured and official, cop knocks that demanded response. Footsteps approached from inside. The deadbolt slid with a metallic click. The door opened exactly 4 inches, just wide enough for basic manners but not hospitality. Mom's face filled that narrow crack, her lipstick a brave holiday red that matched her sweater. For one heartbeat, maybe 2, she didn't understand what her eyes were seeing, didn't process the image of her daughter in uniform holding her father-in-law like a child. Then her expression rearranged itself smoothly. Surprise first, then annoyance, then that brittle smile I'd known my whole life, the one that had tucked me in and cut me down in equal measure. Margaret, she said, using my full name like a weapon. You really should have called first, honey, we weren't expecting you. I wanted to see Grandpa, I said evenly, keeping emotion out of my voice the way the academy taught you. Mom's eyes flicked past me to the street, checking for witnesses, I guess. He's resting, dear, she said smoothly. In 28-degree weather? I shot back. Her smile tightened at the corners. He likes the porch. The fresh air helps his breathing. Dad leaned into view behind her. Chin set in that stubborn way that meant trouble. Lose the attitude, Margaret, he growled. It's Christmas Eve, show some respect for once. Tommy, sorry. Derek appeared next, his trademark grin arriving before his brain caught up. But then his eyes landed on my patrol jacket wrapped around Grandpa's shaking shoulders, and that grin faltered and died. Kara hovered in the background, an apology already dying on her tongue before she could speak it. I didn't answer them because honestly, there wasn't an answer that wouldn't start a fire I couldn't put out with words alone. I shifted my weight, set my heel firmly, and drove my shoulder into that solid wood door with everything I had. The frame cracked with a sound like a gunshot, and the door swung inward violently. Heat rolled over us immediately, cinnamon and roasted turkey and expensive candles, the smell of comfort and wealth. Steam literally rose where winter met hearth, condensation forming around Grandpa's still shivering body. Every conversation in that packed living room died instantly, like someone had pulled the plug on reality itself. I stepped over the threshold deliberately, letting my badge hang where every single person could see it clearly, the gold shield catching firelight and throwing it back in their faces. I didn't raise my voice 1 decibel. Move, I said flatly, and the wall of people split like the Red Sea. Mom stumbled to one side, Dad to the other, both of them backing up. My siblings retreated toward the kitchen, wine glasses clutched in their hands like talismans against what was coming. The living room looked smaller than my memories suggested, cramped despite its size. Stockings hung on the mantel in a neat row, names embroidered in fancy script. Marcus, Patricia, Derek, Kara. I counted them twice, making sure, and felt something cold settle in my stomach. No stocking for Walter, not even a small one. The omission roared louder than the crackling fire, louder than any words could. Derek tried first, always the charmer. Mags, hey, we were just gonna. Don't. I cut him off sharply, my cop voice brooking no argument. Kara's eyes glistened with tears that might have been real. Maggie, we didn't mean to, we weren't trying to. Don't, I repeated, harder this time. Silence gathered between us like black ice on a highway, dangerous and waiting. I heard the thermostat click over, pumping more expensive heat. I heard Grandpa's teeth chatter once, then settle as warmth finally reached him. I heard my own heart knocking against my ribs like it wanted out. The cop in me started counting details for a report I never wanted to write but knew I had to. Environment warm and festive, multiple guests present. Victim found outside at 28 degrees Fahrenheit without adequate covering or supervision. Family present inside. Clear signs of ongoing neglect. Financial support provided regularly by reporting officer. The granddaughter in me saw something different though. A summer memory. Blazing hot July day. Thunderstorm rolling in fast. Grandpa Walter pulling me into his workshop, showing me how to sand wood smooth, telling me stories about building furniture for his young bride. My grandmother who'd passed when I was 10. Those two selves, cop and granddaughter, stood shoulder to shoulder inside me and agreed on one single word. Enough. I adjusted my grip on Grandpa carefully and faced them all. Their eyes skittered around like nervous animals, looking anywhere but at the truth I held in my arms. I let the silence stretch out, let it fill every corner until it pressed against them like physical weight. When I finally spoke, my voice was steady and cold, the kind of voice that carries in courtrooms and makes juries sit up straight. I've been sending you money for 3 years, for $100 every single month for his care. Dad's mouth opened to speak. 12 months a year, I continued. That's $4,800 annually, $14,400 total. Where is it? Mom's hand flew to her pearl necklace, fingers clutching. We used it for his care, Margaret, we absolutely did. Really? I looked around pointedly, taking in the remodeled kitchen visible through the archway, the new furniture, the expensive decorations. Because I see a lot of nice things here, but I don't see heated blankets, I don't see a proper winter coat on him, I don't see any of the care I paid for. Derek swore under his breath. Kara started crying openly now, mascara streaking down her carefully made-up face in black rivers. You want to know what I see? I asked, my voice dropping lower, more dangerous. I see elder abuse, plain and simple. The words landed like physical blows and I watched them flinch. That's ridiculous, Dad blustered, puffing up his chest. We would never, he's family, for God's sake. Family doesn't leave their elderly freezing on porches, I shot back. Family doesn't pocket money meant for care, while the person who needs it goes without. The air changed then, shifted like weather before a storm. The room felt smaller, darker. Someone's champagne glass clinked against a table too loudly. Oh God! Someone whispered from the back of the room, one of the guests. Dad's jaw worked soundlessly like a fish out of water. Mom's lipstick suddenly looked garish against her pale face. Derek swore again, louder. Kara just kept crying, kept whispering, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, to no one in particular. I didn't wait for their defenses, their excuses, their justifications. I shifted Grandpa higher against my chest, felt his arms tighten slightly around my neck, and turned toward that open door where winter waited. Behind me, the house crackled with a new kind of fire. Not the cozy hearth kind, but the kind that eats through lies and leaves only facts. Margaret, wait! Mom called out, desperation cracking her voice. I didn't turn around. Please, we can explain everything, just give us a chance. Still didn't turn. Dad's voice boomed. Don't you dare walk out that door, you're making a scene over nothing. That stopped me, but only for a second. Nothing, I repeated, finally looking back. Hypothermia is something. Neglect is something. Theft is something. We didn't steal, Derek protested weakly. You took money designated for his care and used it for yourselves, I said flatly. In my world, in the legal world, that's called financial exploitation of an elderly person, and it's a felony. The word felony hung in the air like smoke. Outside, the night swallowed us in blessed quiet and cold that felt clean compared to the suffocating warmth inside. Snow pebbled the sidewalk with soft hissing sounds. I tucked Grandpa closer and let out the breath I'd been holding for what felt like hours. Where we going, Maggie girl? Grandpa asked softly against my ear. Someplace that remembers what the word family actually means, I told him firmly. We moved through the cold like a promise finally being kept, and behind us, through walls and windows, I heard the party dying, heard voices rising in panic and accusation, heard the first cracks in a foundation built on lies and selfishness. When I was 9 years old, thunder cracked over our house on Birchwood Avenue loud enough to shake windows. Derek hid under his covers, Kara screamed bloody murder, and Mom snapped at us all to be quiet and quit acting like babies. But Grandpa Walter, he did something different entirely. He grabbed the old patchwork quilt from the back of his recliner, found the flashlight from the kitchen drawer, and crawled right into the blanket fort I'd built in the living room that afternoon. "Storms," he whispered to me, shining that flashlight up under his chin so his face looked spooky and kind all at once. "Storms are just the sky telling stories, nothing to be scared of, kiddo." I forgot to be afraid right then and there. That was Grandpa's gift, see? He turned fear into something small enough to hold in your hands, made it manageable. Even after I grew older, even when the world outside got louder and meaner and more complicated, Grandpa Walter was my still point, my anchor. He made grilled cheese sandwiches with way too much butter, the kind that dripped down your chin. He knew when I was lying about where I'd been or who I'd been with, but he let me learn lessons myself. When my father barked that I was throwing my life away joining the police academy instead of getting married and settling down, Grandpa tilted his head, laid his calloused hand on my cheek and said, "You're worth more than their small dreams, Maggie girl." It's strange, isn't it, how love doesn't shout or demand attention. Love just waits, steady as a grandfather clock ticking in the hall, until you need it most. I grew up in a house where shouting was common currency, the way people paid for things. Dad barked about bills constantly. Mom snapped about appearances and what the neighbors thought. Derek and Cara learned fast that laughing at his jokes and complimenting her hair got them whatever they wanted. Me? I asked questions, pushed back, challenged things that seemed wrong. I signed up for the Army Reserves first, then the police academy after my discharge, and finally earned this badge I wear. My father said I was embarrassing him by wearing a uniform that wasn't a dress or a suit. My mother told me flat out that no decent man wanted a woman who carried a gun instead of babies. But Grandpa Walter, my God. Grandpa pinned my academy badge on with hands that trembled slightly, and tears spilled down his weathered cheeks, proud tears. "You'll do good, Maggie," he said firmly, "because you remember what pain feels like, and that'll make you kind even when you gotta be tough." That night I promised myself silently that he would never ever feel pain because of me or my choices. Fast forward to that Christmas Eve in 2014. 28 degrees outside, no blanket, no proper coat. His body shaking like autumn leaves in wind. My blood went cold because in one snapshot I saw years of lies. They hadn't just neglected him that one night. Oh no, they'd been erasing him day by day while cashing my checks month after month. It all made horrible sense suddenly. The extra car in their driveway, Derek's new truck, the kitchen remodel Mom posted all over Facebook, the vacation photos from Florida. Meanwhile, Grandpa Walter's flannel shirts had grown thinner, worn at the elbows. His slippers had holes I'd just seen with my own eyes. Every transfer I'd made in his name, every sacrifice from my own budget, had bought them another bottle of champagne, another dinner out, another comfortable lie. Standing there holding him close against the cold, I remembered countless times he'd given me what little he had. When I was 12, he'd slipped me quarters for the arcade, told me not to tell Mom because she'd say it was wasteful. When I was 16 and Dad found my police academy application, Grandpa sat with me on his workshop stool and told me never to apologize for wanting more than what they'd settled for. And now, right now, he'd been sitting out there in dangerous cold because they couldn't be bothered to give him a chair by the fire? "Maggie," he murmured against my patrol jacket, his voice muffled. "Don't be too hard on them, honey, they're just busy people." His words cracked something deep inside my chest, split it right open. Too hard? I'd barely begun processing what I'd discovered. I wanted to tell him everything I'd seen in my 15 years on the job. bruises hidden under long sleeves in summer, silent tears of elderly folks left in squalor while their children pocketed pensions and social security checks. We called it elder abuse in the reports, 3 simple words that carried the weight of felony charges and prison time. But behind those words were stories like his. Souls treated as inconvenient, cast aside while the world pretended not to notice or didn't want to get involved. I'd seen strangers do it to strangers. Sadly, I'd arrested them for it. Now it was my own blood, my own family doing it to the man who'd raised me when my parents were too busy climbing social ladders. And here was the cruelest twist of all. Grandpa Walter, even in his suffering and neglect, still defended them, still made excuses for their behavior. That was his way, always had been. He believed family could be forgiven anything, that blood ties were heavier than betrayal. I looked down at his small, weathered face, lips pale but somehow still smiling at me like I was the best thing he'd seen all week. And I realized in that moment why this hurt worse than any crime scene I'd ever worked, any domestic violence call, any child abuse case. Because he deserved better, so much better. Because he'd made me the person who wore this badge with pride. And the badge meant absolutely nothing if I couldn't defend him now, when he needed me most. Inside that house I could still hear muffled voices rising and falling, my family arguing probably, or making excuses oblivious to what was coming. The glass walls of warmth and privilege separated them from the frost that had been gnawing at his bones for who knows how long. Something in me hardened then, solidified like steel cooling. I whispered into his thinning hair. "They'll answer for this, Grandpa, I swear to God they will." He patted my chest weakly but steadily. "Promise me something, Maggie girl." "Anything," I said. "Promise me you won't lose yourself in anger. Don't let it take you over." I closed my eyes because I knew anger was already in me, curling like smoke from a fire that wouldn't go out. But I also knew something else Mom and Dad never taught me. There's a real difference between anger and justice. Anger burns quick and hot and leaves nothing but ashes. Justice, when it's done right, leaves scars on the guilty and creates safety for the innocent. I wanted both, wanted them burned and scared. That's when I made my decision, shifted his weight in my arms, turned back toward that door, and squared my shoulders like I was walking into a firefight. For once in my life, I wasn't going to argue or plead or try to make them see my point of view. I was going to make them see him, really see what they'd done. And when I finally kicked that door open properly, badge displayed clearly, I carried not just a frail old man in my arms. No, sir, I carried every promise he'd ever whispered into my bones, every lesson he'd taught me about right and wrong, every moment of love he'd given freely when others gave nothing at all. The living room looked exactly the same but felt completely foreign to me now. The tree twinkled with gold ribbons and expensive ornaments, presents stacked ridiculously high underneath. Stockings lined that mantel. Marcus, Patricia, Derek, Cara. But no Walter. That detail sliced through me sharper than any knife ever could. Dad set his wine glass down with deliberate force, like a judge with a gavel calling order. "Margaret," he said, his voice dipped in disdain and authority. "What's the meaning of this little performance?" I adjusted my hold on Grandpa and let my badge glint deliberately under the firelight, catching attention. "The meaning," I said evenly, cop voice activated fully, "is that he's freezing on your porch while you people toast yourselves and play perfect family." Mom gasped like I'd cursed in church. That's not fair at all. He wanted fresh air. He asked for it. Grandpa stirred against me. Don't fuss, Maggie, please don't. Quiet, Grandpa, I said gently to him, then louder to the room. Fresh air at 28 degrees isn't fresh air. It's exposure, it's hypothermia waiting to happen, it's a death sentence. Derek chuckled nervously, trying to lighten things. Come on, sis, don't be so dramatic about everything. I cut him off cold. I've seen hypothermia take people half his age and half the time. Don't you dare tell me I'm being dramatic. My eyes scanned that room exactly like I would on an official call. Flushed cheeks from alcohol, glistening food on plates barely touched, laughter residue still hanging in air thick with lies. You were all in here sipping champagne and eating fancy appetizers while he shook like a leaf out there. Kara wrung her hands nervously. Maggie, honestly, we didn't mean to, it wasn't. Intent doesn't matter, I snapped. Impact does. Results matter. And the result is he nearly died out there. I shifted Grandpa's weight, felt his head resting against my shoulder, caught the tremor still in his lips despite the warmth. Dad crossed his arms over his chest, puffing up. You always were dramatic, always looking for a fight where there wasn't one. This is Christmas Eve, for crying out loud. Don't come barging in here, Mom added shrilly, accusing your own family of terrible things. I met Dad's stare and held it. Family protects vulnerable people. Family doesn't leave them on porches like forgotten furniture. You can't be bothered to move. For a moment, nobody spoke at all. The fire crackled mockingly. Mom's hand clutched her necklace so hard her knuckles went white. Derek poured himself another drink like alcohol could drown accountability. Grandpa whispered desperately. Please, Maggie girl, it's not worth destroying everything. But it was worth everything, every single thing. I scanned those stockings again, read the embroidered names, felt the absence scream. You erased him, I said quietly, but my voice shook with fury barely contained. You've been erasing him for years, haven't you? Mom frowned defensively. We certainly have not, that's absurd. You think I don't notice things? I snapped back. All those transfers I made for his care, where'd that money go, huh? Because it sure as hell didn't buy him warmth, didn't buy proper clothes, didn't buy the dignity he deserves. Derek raised his glass mockingly. Now hold on just one damn minute. Shut up, I said sharper than I'd ever spoken to him. Dad slammed his hand against the armrest. You don't talk to your brother that way in my house, young lady. Your house. I barked out a laugh that had no humor in it. Built partially on my money I sent specifically for him. You paraded my help as generosity while treating him like a burden you couldn't wait to get rid of. Silence thickened like humidity before a storm. The kind that falls in interrogation rooms just before a confession finally cracks. Kara started crying again. We just thought you'd never know, never find out. There it was, the slip, the admission. You're right, I said coldly. I didn't know, not until tonight anyway, but now I do, and now there's no going back from this. Dad straightened up, trying to reclaim control. You're not going to lecture us in our own home. Put him down right now, go back to your shift, and mind your own damn business. That was it. The exact moment where the line between cop and granddaughter fused into one person. This is my business, I said firmly, letting each word land separately. It became my business the second I saw his lips turning blue while you people toasted yourselves. I let the words fall like a gavel. Elder abuse, Derek snorted dismissively. Oh, for God's sake, give me a break, elder abuse? Elder abuse, I repeated louder, colder, more official. It's a criminal charge, a felony actually. Neglect of a dependent adult. And I've got enough evidence right here in my arms to start filing paperwork tonight. Their faces shifted dramatically then. Pale tight, the smugness leaking out like air from a punctured tire. Mom whispered desperately. Margaret, please think about what you're saying. I held her gaze without blinking. I have thought about it, been thinking about it since I found him. You wanted fresh air? Let's see how you breathe when the law knocks on your door. The silence that followed was different now, transformed. Not defensive anymore, not mocking or dismissive. Real fear had entered the room, subtle and sharp as broken glass. Grandpa touched my arm with trembling fingers. Maggie, honey, let it be, please. But I couldn't, not yet, not until they understood. I looked at each of them individually. Dad's jaw working, Mom's lips quivering, Derek's swagger completely gone. Kara's mascara streaking down her face like war paint. These weren't my enemies in uniform, weren't strangers I could professionally distance myself from. These were the people who'd supposedly raised me or claimed to, and they'd become strangers anyway. I spoke 6 words clearly, each one a nail. He's safe, elder abuse report filed. It was like striking a match in a room full of gasoline. Derek cursed loudly and dropped his glass, liquid bleeding across expensive carpet. Mom clutched at Dad frantically, whispering, No, 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 this can't be happening. Kara sank into the couch like her strings had been cut. Dad surged forward like he might physically grab me, but one hard look at the badge on my chest stopped him cold. Their faces went absolutely white, drained of color. I shifted Grandpa against me protectively, turned toward that door where winter waited honestly, and let the night swallow us whole. The fire snapped behind me, but nobody laughed now, nobody toasted, nobody pretended anymore. In the darkness outside, I whispered to him, They can't hide anymore, Grandpa, not from me, not from the law, never again. The cold bit deeper as I stepped carefully off that porch. My boots cracked the ice that had formed along the steps, each sound sharp and final like punctuation. Behind me, the door slammed shut, but not before I caught panic rising in their voices. Shouts overlapping, glass shattering somewhere. The champagne bubble of their perfect night bursting completely. Maggie girl, Grandpa stirred in my arms. Put me down now, I can walk on my own. No, sir, I said firmly. You've walked enough for one lifetime, tonight I carry you. He sighed, his head resting against my shoulder exactly like it had all those nights I'd fallen asleep against him watching TV as a child. They didn't mean real harm, he murmured, still defending them. My jaw tightened. Intent doesn't erase consequences, Grandpa. The snow squeaked under us as I crossed that yard, heading for my cruiser. My patrol car sat half a block down, its black and white frame catching the glow of Christmas lights strung across neighboring porches. Neighbors peeked through curtains as we passed. I saw them. They saw the badge clearly, saw the old man in my arms, saw the storm on my face, and they turned away quickly, pretending not to notice, just like always. When I eased Grandpa into the passenger seat as gently as possible, he flinched at the cold vinyl. I cranked the heater until it roared like a beast, and only then did I allow myself to actually breathe properly. Dispatch buzzed faintly on the radio. Routine calls, domestic disputes, noise complaints, nothing extraordinary. But inside me, everything had shifted permanently, like tectonic plates grinding into new positions. I looked at Grandpa's thin hands folded in his lap, hands that had once built furniture, brushed my hair when I was small, taught me to tie my shoes and ride a bike. They trembled now, not just from lingering cold, but from the weight of what had just happened, what I'd done. "You're safe," I told him, my voice catching slightly. "That's all that matters now." But my words rang hollow even to my own ears, because I knew safety wasn't just about temperature or physical shelter. Safety meant dignity, respect, being seen and valued, and those things had been stripped from him long before tonight, systematically stolen. Inside that house, the shouting had turned frantic. I could hear it even from here. Through the frosted glass, I could almost see the scene playing out. Dad barking orders like a general, Mom wringing her hands, Derek pacing, Kara crying her eyes out. The mask had cracked wide open, and fear seeped through every gap. "Report filed." Dad would repeat, like saying the words out loud could somehow undo reality. "Elder abuse." Derek would sneer, trying desperately to laugh it off, but his voice would tremble and betray him. Mom would cling to someone, whispering, "What if she really did it? What if she really filed?" They were unraveling, coming completely apart. I shifted the gear into drive but didn't press the gas pedal yet. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I was torn, genuinely torn right down the middle. One part of me screamed to march back in there and slap handcuffs on each of them, drag them to the station in front of all their guests and neighbors. Another part whispered about blood ties, about holiday memories that hadn't always been bad, about Grandpa's voice pleading for peace and mercy. "You okay there, Maggie?" Grandpa asked softly, reading me like he always could. I looked at him, at the way his eyes still carried warmth despite everything they'd done to him. "I don't know," I admitted honestly. "I've arrested complete strangers for less than this, Grandpa, way less, but tonight? Tonight it's my own blood." His smile was sad but tender somehow. "That's the hardest kind of justice to serve, honey, when it's family." The heater hummed steadily, filling the silence between us. Outside, snowflakes drifted down like falling ash from some distant fire. Back in that house, chaos climbed higher and higher. I imagined them scrambling frantically, debating whether to chase after me, whether to call and beg, whether to destroy evidence that was nothing more than the plain truth of their own neglect. Every second that ticked by on my dashboard clock, the reality of consequences pressed harder on their chests, squeezed tighter. And in that moment, sitting in my cruiser with the engine running, I realized something important. This was their breaking point, not mine, theirs. Grandpa reached over slowly, his frail fingers brushing my hand on the wheel. "Don't let hate eat you alive, Maggie girl," he said firmly despite his weakness. "Promise me that much." His touch thawed something frozen inside me. I closed my eyes, remembering every bedtime story he'd told, every bowl of soup he'd made when I was sick, every whispered prayer I'd overheard him making for me when the rest of the house was too loud and chaotic. "I promise to protect you," I said carefully, choosing my words. "That's the only promise I can make right now." I put the car into gear properly and pulled away, tires crunching over packed snow. The house grew smaller and smaller in my rearview mirror, its lights still glowing like nothing had changed at all. But inside those walls, I knew everything had changed, fundamentally and forever. Half a mile down Birchwood, I pulled into the precinct parking lot. The building stood quiet, wreaths hung on the doors for decoration, but the duty light glowed steady and reliable. I carried Grandpa inside where warmth wrapped around us immediately, not just from heaters but from the nods of officers who lifted their chins in silent respect when they saw us. "Sarge," Officer Martinez said quietly, "you good?" I looked down at Grandpa, then back up at my colleague. "We're good," I said firmly. "We're gonna be just fine." Behind me somewhere, back in that expensive house on Birchwood Avenue, my family was still unraveling rapidly. Panic would give way to fear, fear to desperation, desperation to reality. They would finally realize that the report wasn't just an empty threat or a bluff. It was a promise, and I always kept my promises. For the first time in years, the scales felt balanced, felt right. Back on Birchwood, the fire still glowed in that living room, but the warmth had bled completely out of the room and the relationships. My 6 words hung heavier than those stockings on the mantel. "He's safe, elder abuse report filed." Now let me tell you something about consequences, my dear viewers. They don't always arrive with sirens and handcuffs. Sometimes they arrive quietly, seeping into your life like water through a cracked foundation until everything you built comes tumbling down. At the station that night, Officer Chun brought Grandpa Walter a mug of hot cocoa, steam curling up in the break room air. "For you, sir," she said gently, setting it down carefully. Grandpa's eyes twinkled, shy but genuinely grateful. "Thank you kindly, young lady, that's mighty thoughtful." Chun smiled warmly. "Around here everyone's grandpa on Christmas, that's just how we roll." The words visibly softened him. Relaxed shoulders that had been tense for hours. For the first time that entire night, he looked less like a victim of neglect and more like himself, like the man who'd taught me to fish and change a tire. I stood in the doorway watching this simple exchange, and pride mixed with guilt twisted together in my chest like tangled rope. Pride because he was finally truly safe. Guilt because I hadn't seen it sooner, hadn't noticed the signs that must have been there for months, maybe years. Sergeant Rodriguez approached from the duty desk. "Mags, you want me to log an official report on this?" The question tightened something inside me like a fist clenching. I'd said it out loud in that house, thrown the words like weapons, meant every syllable. But now the paperwork, the chain reaction, the investigation that would follow, all of that was brutally real and permanent. My hand brushed the badge on my chest instinctively. I thought about Dad's face turning pale, Mom's hands trembling, blood against law, family against duty. "Yes," I said finally, and my voice didn't waver one bit. "Log it officially, full report." Rodriguez nodded, already typing, fingers flying over the keyboard. The clack of keys sounded like nails being hammered into a coffin, final and irreversible. Back at the house, panic mounted to new heights. "They'll take everything," Mom whispered frantically. "The house, the money, our reputations will be completely ruined." Derek grabbed his coat roughly. "I'll go talk to her, reason with her." Dad blocked the door physically. "You'll do nothing of the sort. If you show up there, it proves we're guilty of something." Kara sobbed openly. "But we are guilty, don't you see? We left him out there, we took her money, we are guilty." The words fell like stones into still water, ripples spreading. None of them wanted to admit the truth out loud, but it sat between them now, undeniable and ugly. They hadn't seen Grandpa Walter as a person with needs and dignity. They'd seen him as a burden, an inconvenience. Worse than that, they'd seen him as a convenient cover story to fund their comfortable lifestyle upgrades. Maybe she won't go through with it, Mom said desperately, grasping at straws. Maybe she'll calm down and think better of it. Dad shook his head slowly. She's not like us, Patricia. Once Margaret says something, she means it, always has. The 6 words echoed again through their minds. He's safe, elder abuse report filed. And for the first time in their privileged lives, they realized the nightmare wasn't outside their door waiting to get in. It was already inside their walls, living and breathing. At the station, Grandpa sipped his cocoa carefully, his hand steadier now with warmth. "Maggie," he said softly, "don't ruin your Christmas for me, honey. I'm not worth all this trouble." I crouched down in front of him so we were eye level. "Grandpa, this isn't about Christmas at all. This is about right and wrong, period." His eyes glistened with unshed tears. "They're still your family though, your blood." I swallowed hard. "Family doesn't leave you freezing on porches, Grandpa, whatever they are. They stop being family tonight." He looked down into his cup, watching his reflection ripple in the dark liquid. "They'll be scared now, Maggie girl, and scared people do foolish things sometimes. They should be scared," I said, and the words came out sharper than I'd intended, harder. He reached for my hand, his skin papery thin but his grip surprisingly firm. "Justice matters, I know that, but so does mercy. Don't let one bury the other completely." His words pierced straight through my armor. I thought about every call I'd been on in 15 years. Every perpetrator I'd handcuffed who begged for just one break. Every victim who wanted punishment. And every other victim who just wanted the pain to stop. Justice and mercy never walked easily together. Never had, probably never would. And now they pulled me in completely opposite directions like horses tied to different posts. Rodriguez approached again, folder in hand, official and crisp. "Reports logged, Sarge. APS will get notified first thing tomorrow morning. Adult Protective Services." Those words landed heavy as concrete blocks. Once they got involved, everything changed permanently. Investigations, home visits, court hearings, possible criminal charges. I nodded. "Good, that's good." But inside, I wasn't completely sure if it was good, or if I just destroyed what was left of my family forever. Grandpa smiled faintly, reading my turmoil like an open book. "Maggie, you've always carried the weight of 2 hearts, yours and mine. Just don't let mine break yours in the process." His words clung to me like smoke to clothing. Back at that house, the echo of 6 words rang endlessly through the walls. Here at the station, the consequences had officially begun their slow, grinding process. And somewhere between those 2 places, my heart braced itself for the storm I knew was coming next. The phone at the duty desk rang sharply just after midnight. Rodriguez picked it up, listened for a moment, then glanced at me with raised eyebrows. "It's your folks, Max," he said, covering the receiver with one hand. "You want me to hang up or what?" My stomach tightened into knots. They never called me, not for birthdays, not for promotions, not for anything except obligation. Now, with 6 words hanging over them like a guillotine blade, suddenly they needed me urgently. "I'll take it," I said, and Rodriguez handed me the phone. Dad's voice crackled down the line, strained and tight. "Margaret. Not Maggie, never Maggie from him. Listen here, we need to talk right now." I kept my tone flat and professional. "There's nothing to talk about anymore." "Yes, there is," he snapped back. "You can't just file a report and walk away. Do Do you have any idea what this could do to us? To our name? To our standing in this community? Yes, I said simply. That's exactly the point, Dad. Behind him I heard Mom sobbing dramatically. Kara's voice joined in pleading. Derek cursed in the background, muffled but clear. A whole symphony of panic and desperation. Margaret, Mom cried, her voice breaking through. Please, we made a mistake, just one mistake. Don't let the state tear our family apart over one night. One night. My voice rose before I could control it. This wasn't one night. This has been years of taking my money, years of neglect, years of treating him like garbage. We didn't mean to. Mom started. Stop saying you didn't mean it, I snapped hard. You did it over and over and over. Intent doesn't erase impact. The silence on the line stretched out, broken only by Mom's continued sobbing. Finally, Dad spoke again, quieter this time, almost defeated. We'll make it right somehow. We'll take proper care of him. Just tell them not to come. You can fix this, Margaret, your family. That word burned hotter than any fire. Family. I looked across the break room at Grandpa, sitting small in that chair, sipping cocoa, watching me with those wise, tired eyes. His eyes met mine, soft and pleading, but not for himself, never for himself, for them. He shook his head slightly, lips forming words only I could read in the air between us. Don't destroy them completely. I closed my eyes, felt the pull threatening to tear me in half. Justice dragging me one direction. Mercy pulling the opposite way. I can't undo what's been filed, I told Dad firmly. The report is in the system. APS will follow up. That's how the law works. Dad swore, the sound ugly and raw and desperate. You'll regret this, Margaret, mark my words. No, I said, my voice steady as bedrock. The only thing I regret is not seeing sooner what you were doing to him. I hung up the phone. Where are you watching from tonight? Drop a comment if you've ever had to choose between family and doing what's right, because let me tell you, it's the hardest choice you'll ever make. 3 hours later, they showed up at the station, and I mean actually showed up. Not in their nice clothes and pride, but in pajamas under coats, faces pale as ghosts, eyes red from crying. They looked smaller somehow, like fear had hollowed them out from the inside. Rodriguez bristled, stepping forward protectively. They're not supposed to be here, Sarge. I'll handle it, I said quietly. Dad started first, words tumbling out fast and desperate. Margaret, please just listen for 1 minute. Stop. My voice cut through his like a knife. You had your chance to talk when Grandpa was on your porch freezing. Mom clasped her hands together like she was praying. We were wrong, we know that now, we see it. Please don't let the courts drag us through the mud. Think about what people will say. Derek tried his old swagger, but it fell flat. You don't really want your own family in handcuffs, do you, sis? But even as he spoke, his hand shook visibly, betraying his fear. Kara stepped forward carefully, tears streaming. Margaret, please, we were selfish, I admit it. But he's our grandfather too, don't take him away from us forever. I looked at them, really looked, these people who shared my blood but hadn't shared my values in years. And I felt nothing but the cold I'd carried in from that porch. He's not your grandfather anymore, I said flatly, letting each word land separately. Not after tonight, you lost that privilege when you left him to freeze. They flinched like I'd physically struck them. Behind me, Grandpa's voice rose, fragile but firm. Maggie. I turned slowly. He stood in the doorway, blanket around his shoulders, face pale but resolute, determined. "Don't," he said softly but clearly. "Please don't." "Grandpa," I started. He stepped closer, each movement slow and deliberate, careful. "They're still my family, still your blood. Don't let anger turn you cruel like them." My chest tightened painfully. "They left you to freeze, Grandpa." "I know." His voice trembled but his eyes didn't waver. "And I forgave them before you even walked through that door tonight." My throat ached. "They don't deserve forgiveness, not this." "Maybe not," he whispered, moving closer. "But forgiveness isn't about what people deserve. It's about what we choose to carry forward or leave behind." The silence that followed felt suffocating, oppressive. My family behind me, desperate and broken. My grandfather before me, weary but merciful, impossibly kind. And me caught directly between them, badge heavy on my chest, heart even heavier in my ribcage. I wanted to rage, wanted to drag them into holding cells, make them feel every ounce of the cold they'd forced on him. But his eyes, those same eyes that had calmed childhood storms, held me firmly. And I realized something profound. Justice could punish them temporarily, but mercy? Mercy would haunt them forever, knowing they'd been spared by the very man they'd betrayed. "Grandpa," I whispered, voice breaking, "this could ruin everything for them. Their jobs, their reputations, everything." He nodded slowly. "Yes, it could, but if you push too far, Maggie girl, it might ruin you too, and I can't have that." His words sank deep, settling into my bones. Justice mattered, absolutely it mattered, but so did mercy. And maybe, just maybe, the truest revenge wasn't prison bars and court dates. Maybe it was making them live every single day with the memory of what they'd done and the grace of the man they'd wronged. I lowered my gaze, felt the room spin slightly with the weight of decision. Finally I spoke. "The report stands, APS will come and investigate fully, but what happens after that? That depends entirely on how you people live with what you've done." Dad swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. Mom wept harder, shoulders shaking. Derek cursed under his breath, turning away. Kara nodded faintly, like she understood something the others didn't yet. Grandpa's hand found mine, his grip weak but his voice strong. "That's enough, Maggie, that's enough now." And for the first time that entire night, I let the fire in my chest flicker down just enough to breathe properly. Now let me tell you about what happened in the days and weeks that followed, because that's the part that really mattered. The station became Grandpa Walter's sanctuary, his real home. Officers brought him homemade cookies. Rodriguez taught him chess. Chan showed him photos of her kids. The rookies asked his advice about life and relationships like he was their own grandfather, and you know what? He took to that role naturally, beautifully. "This place," he said one evening, eyes twinkling in the fluorescent light, "feels like family, real family." Those words pierced my heart. Not because they hurt, but because they healed something I didn't know was broken. He wasn't invisible here, wasn't a burden or an inconvenience. He was seen, valued, loved by people who chose to see him, not people obligated by blood. The APS investigation moved forward like machinery, efficient and thorough. Agents reviewed bank statements, conducted interviews, asked neighbors what they'd witnessed over the years. There would be consequences for my family, mandatory oversight, financial restrictions, possibly even criminal charges depending on what investigators found. They would never escape the stain of what they'd done, never. But I didn't feel triumph anymore, that had faded. Just a deep, steady calm, like after a storm passes and the air clears. Grandpa sat beside me in the break room one afternoon, his hand covering mine. "You've done enough, Maggie girl," he said gently. "Have I?" I asked, genuinely uncertain. "Yes." His smile was soft and knowing. "The law will handle what it must, let their own guilt take care of the rest." I nodded, finally understanding what he'd been trying to teach me. Justice wasn't about vengeance or punishment for its own sake. It was about balance, about restoration. And balance finally had been restored. My family, they unraveled slowly but completely. Dad stopped going to work, couldn't face colleagues. Mom closed curtains and stopped answering the door. Derek raged at everyone, at everything. Kara was the only one who cried publicly, her sobs echoing through the neighborhood like an endless apology. 6 words had done all this. "He's safe," elder abuse report filed. Words they heard in their heads every time the phone rang, every time a neighbor looked too long, every time guilt clawed at their chests in the quiet hours. And I didn't need to add anything more. Their own consciences were punishment enough. On New Year's Eve, a week after everything changed, the precinct gathered again. Pizza boxes stacked high, laughter filling the air like music. Someone had strung colored lights around the break room doorway, making it feel festive. Grandpa sat in the center of everything, a paper crown on his head, courtesy of Officer Martinez, who'd gotten it from a Christmas cracker. He caught my eye across the room and mouthed silently, "Thank you, Maggie girl." I walked over, kneeling down so we were eye level. "For what, Grandpa?" I asked softly. "For giving me back a family," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "A real one." I blinked hard against the sting in my eyes. "You never lost me, never." "I know that," he said, reaching for my hand. "But now I know I'll never be alone again either, and that's a gift." His words wrapped around me like those old quilts he used to tuck me in with when thunder rolled outside and I was just a scared little girl. Later that night, when the clock struck midnight and cheers echoed through the station, I stepped outside for fresh air. The snow was falling again, soft and endless street lamps painting the world in gold. I thought about my blood family, sitting in that house with curtains drawn tight, afraid to face the world they'd once ruled with such arrogance and pride. And I thought about Grandpa inside, surrounded by warmth and laughter and people who'd chosen to cherish him. That was justice, real justice. That was mercy working alongside it. That was enough, more than enough. As I stood there in the falling snow, I whispered to the night, "He's safe." And this time, those words weren't a warning or a threat or even a statement of fact. They were a promise kept, a vow fulfilled. When I finally took Grandpa to live with me permanently, not back to Birchwood Avenue but to my small apartment across town, he fell asleep in my car, his face peaceful for the first time in years. I whispered to the darkness, "You're safe now, Grandpa, always." Stories like this, my dear friends, aren't just about families breaking apart. They're about choices we make, the choice to protect, the choice to forgive, the choice to redefine what family really means when blood fails you. If you've ever felt unseen, if you've ever had to fight to protect someone you love, know this: justice and mercy can walk together, hand in hand. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do isn't shouting or seeking revenge. Sometimes it's building a new life where love actually wins. where people are valued, where dignity matters more than blood. That's my story. That's what happened when I was 63 years old. And it's a decision I've never regretted, not for one single moment. Well, my dear viewers, that's my story, the hardest thing I ever did in my entire career. Grandpa Walter lived with me for 7 more beautiful years before he passed peacefully in his sleep at 89. Those 7 years were filled with laughter, chess games, terrible jokes, and more love than that fancy house on Birchwood Avenue ever held. My blood family? We haven't spoken in 10 years now, not a word. The APS investigation found evidence of financial exploitation, and they face consequences, fines, mandatory oversight, community service. But you know what the real punishment was? Living with what they'd done, knowing they'd thrown away a relationship with a good man for money and comfort. If this story touched your heart tonight, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment telling me, where are you watching from, and have you ever had to choose justice over family? And if you'd like to hear more real stories from my life, stories about hard choices and second chances, and what it means to do the right thing even when it costs everything, then subscribe to Grandma Old Stories. Hit that bell so you never miss when I share the next chapter. Because somewhere out there, someone needs to know they're not alone. Someone needs permission to protect the vulnerable. Someone needs to hear that choosing right over easy is always worth it. Thank you for listening to an old woman's story tonight. Thank you for caring about Grandpa Walter even though you never met him, and remember, family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who show up when everyone else walks away. Until next time, this is Maggie Henderson saying, stay strong, choose love, and never be afraid to do what's right. Good night and God bless you all.